But if you're looking for someone in this class who can maybe take over and give you a blend of size and speed to or at least explosion and tough running, let's put it that way. This class isn't one where you would say right off the bat there's a ton of instant starters. I think Jeremiah Love is really the only clear instant starter that would come into almost any running back situation outside of maybe the top 5 to 7 running backs in the league and take that over. He would probably take that over or at least have a heavy split. There are a few guys in this class who there's actually quite a few guys in this class who are maybe one skill or trade away from becoming a starter if the running back room was a little weaker on a team. And at very least, even on a stronger running back depth chart, could at least develop a situational role, if not a true committee role as a change of pace or even the lead back in the committee. Jadarian Price certainly fits that mold for people where you can say size-wise, he could probably add a little weight and still maintain his burst. He's someone that will likely, be versatile with good burst and speed and agility. He's, I think his floor is slightly lower than maybe what people have to say, but it's not bad. I think he's just someone that, you're looking at someone who probably can play zone or gap. He can catch the ball. He has the speed that you're looking for. I think that he can, if I was going to criticize anything about his game, it would be that his pass protection, his pass receiving, his vision, they're all good, but not great. I would say that he's one of those guys that can get hung up when there's a little bit of when there's some obstacles and he doesn't give himself a way out because you can see that his feet kind of stall and he doesn't have the ability to explode in either direction in the way that he sets his feet when he gets confused. And there's some situations where that happens. But, overall, this class is more intriguing from the standpoint of backs who have done well against spread defenses, backs who are smaller that people go, oh, we want a big back. But, the Bills wanted a big back, and they got James Cook. There's a lot of guys, and James Cook is no slouch. And I think that there's a few backs in this class who are more in the James Cook dimensions and skill sets or an Aaron Jones coming out. Aaron Jones at UTEP was like 5'9", 194, and he gained about 10 to 12 pounds over the course of time. And I don't think anybody would laugh away Aaron Jones being in their backfield in his prime. And I think that that's kind of, we've got 3 or 4 backs in this class who are that way. There's a back at Penn State in Nicholas Singleton who started off really strong in his career, who I think a lot of people feel like he just kind of disappeared and they look at production. But I think that Singleton's the guy that you have to look at him and realize that Penn State wants to keep running backs and wants to recruit running backs. And like most teams that do that, they're going to split time with backs. Nick Chubb was way better than Sony Michel, even though Sony Michel was very good. And they put Swift in there even at the end too. You've got to play backs to keep them, and give them opportunities. And I think that Singleton was used in a compartmentalized way, but he's not just a compartmentalized back. So he's one that would be fun and interesting. But I think there's backs not even being mentioned in most draft Nick circles that you can probably sign off the free agent pool who I think are as strong or stronger than some of the big names we may talk about. Like, I'm not a Mike Washington fan. And I'll definitely explain why, because I can, and we'll go into that in a little bit, but I'll just tell you this. There's a 188-pound running back that I would rather have running between the tackles in against these spread defenses when you're playing 2 tight ends and you have extra gaps, who actually uses his pads better and has way more explosion and better vision and skills than what Washington has right now. And that's Damon Claiborne. I would take Damon Claiborne right now over what I've seen from Mike Washington. It doesn't mean Mike Washington can't develop, but you got to hold on to the ball, and you got to know how to use your pads, and you don't turn your back into oncoming contact, or else you basically mitigate or eliminate everything that's good about what you do well. I mean, think of your division rival linebacker from years ago, Chris Spielman, who knew a thing or two about facing running backs. And he taught me that lesson many, many years ago when I first watched D'Angelo Williams at Memphis playing Louisville's Michael Bush. And the things that Spielman broke down had a lasting impact with me, because Michael Bush ran like he was a 200-pound, 205-pound player, and D'Angelo Williams ran like he was a 230-pound player. And you can see the difference of what happened with them in the pros.
We got Michael Bush with the Bears, so we got a little glimpse of that.
Yeah, that was when we were going through so many different RB2s every year. Chester Taylor, Michael Bush, every guy we tried to throw at the wall. They had like a great year the year before. Bringing them to Chicago, it didn't get the same results. But Phil, any thoughts there from kind of the door here?
Honestly didn't know where Matt was going to go, but for me, Nick Singleton, you look at the tale of two seasons, but you also look at what Matt said so eloquently. There is the splitting and the feeding and the NIL life is college football now. So you have to appease a lot of people, a lot of sponsors, parents, people that are paying big bucks to get this guy to come here, appease that kid. Very difficult ground right now. I don't know what's going to transpire with that, but that's not for this. But with this back, I just think there's two plays that stood out for me from Singleton that I was like, this dude is way underappreciated, because he's splitting and he's playing with a guy that I thought was a terrible quarterback, and was cracking up laughing when they were saying Dan Orlovsky's talking about him last year. He would be the number one guy if he can't. Where, Dan? Where's that tape?
UFL.
So anyway, I look at this running back. There's a play, Greg. It's 3rd and 13. There's a blitz and a stunt. He picks up the defensive end because the tackle picks up the blitz, who has a closer run at the quarterback, which was the right decision. And there's Singleton just blasting this defensive end, lifting him off the ground. Doing the dirty work for me. If you're a running back, everybody in college has obviously been all state. I shouldn't say everybody, but if you're out there starting on a scholarship, you're pretty damn athletic and talented. When I look at Singleton, though, and he can explode, he does look to me to have that true 4-4 get up, and he breaks through that line. He has good football vision and acumen, and that kind of stuff just shouldn't go by the wayside, because I agree with Matt. This isn't the greatest running back class. There's guys that you could pick up late in the game, in the draft game, whether it be undrafteds or 7th round picks, like Monungai. He only led the Big Ten in rushing and did all this stuff, but somehow his 5'8" frame and how he ran a 40 affected. This happens every year. I laugh at all these blog boys that go through this, and they put, as he's talking about, Washington, who's 220 or 230 pounds and ran a 4.33. Now his name goes higher because of that 4.33. But when you look at the tape, there's concerns and field vision and instincts. And like Matt said, a continuous tendency to turn his body to contact in the wrong way. So just, I look at that. Singleton is my guy. I took him in my mock draft, Greg, in the 3rd round. I was able to grab him, or 2nd round. I had to have that kid on the team to add to my running back room, because you never know with Swift. This is the end of his contract. Does he come back? Do you pay him? What we feel with Ben Johnson when he was coming over for Detroit, everyone passed him off because he traded him to Philly out of Detroit when he became the OC officially, and after 1 year, obviously. So the progression here to pick a running back, apologies for the pop.
It's okay. Hoping you were going to get attacked there. It's good content.
Singleton is a really good running back. I think had he came out his year, Matt, last year, where would he have gone in your mind then with Singleton?
Well, I think for me, I graded him for this year, but I did watch him and Quinshon Judkins after their first year. Yeah. And I thought it was pretty close between the two. I had Judkins a little higher, but we have to remember that Singleton like you mentioned with Drew Aller essentially ran an offense where they used a lot of misdirection and single look type of plays to just manufacture offense with him at the helm. And when you do that, it makes the run game even more predictable because and then they split up the run game to like inside and outside, let Singleton be more the receiver on RPOs. So it was a very predictable role for Singleton. And defenses eventually knew that because they didn't think Drew Aller was going to basically enforce anything that, by overplaying whatever Singleton would do. And we got to remember, DeAndre Swift fits into the strategy for Caleb Williams. He, Swift knew the offense. So why are we going to veer away from that when we can have continuity of a guy who understands the Ben Johnson offense early on? At least we can, we don't have to have another competing factor there. So, Singleton gives you that opportunity right there. If we're looking for guys that you can get later, I'm going to mention some guys that are worthwhile that can give you maybe what Swift is, offers, but maybe even a little bit more than Swift down the line. Robert Henry Jr. of UTSA is kind of an Aaron Jones wannabe. He's about the same size and weight as Jones was at UTEP. He is
5'9", 197.
Yeah. And he's someone that catches the ball extraordinarily well in terms of going up to win the ball in the air. Route running can get better, but in terms of his ability to just catch the ball, it's extremely strong. He's a pretty good pass protector as it is at his size for right now, and he can get better. But he's a good inside runner. He's elusive. He's someone that can create, between the tackles, off tackle, outside, in the open field. And he's not, he's not the fastest guy, but he's around the same speed as Aaron Jones was. So there's a lot to like about him. Other guys that fit that bill that, I talked about Claiborne. Claiborne to me at 188, I know it seems light, but we have to remember that what's more important is, do you dictate the chain of contact when you're interacting with a defender? Because if you drop the pads first and deliver first contact, you're dictating the defender as he's reacting. You're making that second move. If you have good pad level, you run like a bigger back. If you have a history of playing in the SEC as a 4-year starter and having the volume like that, and you don't break down, that's important. That, Ray Rice, Cedric Benson, Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, some of those guys are smaller that I mentioned there, and played smaller. Ray Rice played smaller. If you can handle the volume that for that many years, it tends to translate. He's a smart inside runner, and Jamal Charles was one of those guys that can really dictate what happens, even against defensive tackles. So Claiborne's a very good inside runner, short yardage runner, but he also can get outside and be huge in the open field. And if you want him to sit for a year and let him add a little bit of weight, he reminds me of guys like, Charlie Garner, James Cook. There's a little McCoy to him, as well. And I think that he probably is one of the smartest runners in this class. Then other guys that fit this bill. Look, you want a big back and you want to get one for basically a low cost. Get SMU's TJ Harden, who's 6'2", 220. He catches better than pretty much every back in this class. His hand-eye coordination is fantastic. And he just, whether you want him to run through a reach, wrap, a hit, multiple of each, all during the same carry, he's going to do that. He's not extraordinarily fast, but he is big, strong, tough. Played at UCLA. He can run inside zone. He can run gap plays. Just an easy back to get. If you want a little bit more of a Khalil Herbert type that you once had, and get kind of on the cheaper end of that, but who I'd also described as Kyle Monangai with more explosion, but without the relentless open field power, but some good, decent enough receiving skills. Devon Booth of Mississippi State is an intriguing runner.
Hail State.
Yeah, in that regard, he's not bad at all in that regard. And then if you're looking for just there's Jamal Haynes, out of Georgia Tech, who was 3 years was a slot receiver, but they didn't really use slot receivers much at Tech. So they decided to make him a running back. He can catch. And he is explosive. He also knows how to use his pads. And he's one of those guys that could be in that James Cook vein. I mean, again, the Bears are playing big boy ball up front. But when you have those two extra gaps and you're playing against smaller defenders, you're going to get guys who can house it. And a lot of these guys I mentioned can do that, catch out of the backfield and run tough. So those are guys that a lot of those guys I mentioned might not even go in round 7, but you could probably find them. And I think with your backfield as the way it is, you don't need to go too early.
No, 100%. I mean, it's hard. Last year was certainly a running back deep draft, but as the amount of running backs that you broke down, like I said, I think it was 52. There's still plenty of running backs to be able to be had. And, I think I've learned throughout the years, unless you're getting one of those Ashton Genty, Jeremiah Loves, Bijan Robinsons at the top, you can find, a running back that's going to meet the same kind of standard of a second, third, fourth rounder in those later rounds if you know how to trust your evaluation. We got Shane here in the chat with a special request. Says Mr. Waldman, he's being very respectful, says, please talk about Jaden Nixon and his fit with Ben Johnson.
Man, well, of course, much love to Shane. And, I thought the UCF, the University of Central Florida backfield, was one of the most fun backfields to watch this year after RJ Harvey left. Mm-hmm. And two of my, you look at Nixon, and Nixon is explosive. He can catch. He's a very good return specialist, but he can work inside. And when you look at his size, I mean, he's not far away from being able to develop. He's 192, 5'9", 192. He also fits in that range of worst case scenario, you got kind of a Tyler Goodson who hangs around and continues to beat out bigger name guys for a situational role for the Colts. But he, maybe he's never a high-end starter and he's just kind of a contributor. Nixon can give you that with the special team skill and maybe give you a situational role as a receiver out of the backfield. But he does have good skill on gap runs. And I think he can be a good outside zone runner. And at best, if he surpasses expectations, maybe a little bit more Kyron Williams, but with jet fuel. He's that type of player. I'm going to go about another guy I didn't mention, but I have probably higher than anybody on this earth right now, who's his teammate, and that's Miles Montgomery, who's a 5'10", 208 pound back, who I think is the best pass protector in this class, with technique-wise, and his processing speed and accuracy with short yardage runs, with all different types of scenarios, I think is his strength. So he's not super fast, but he has good enough speed, good enough acceleration, uses his pads well, I think he's one of the smartest runners in this draft class. And that combo was one of the most fun to see. Both of those guys could be assets for you. And I doubt Miles Montgomery will get drafted. And I think he's going to be a gem for a team because of the way that he plays. He reminds me kind of Kenneth Gainwell, but with a little bit more in the tank as in terms of power, and in terms of the physical skills. Not a lot more, but a little bit more.
I'm going to run you through a few names through the chat. We're going to switch gears here to wide receiver. I know we kind of set a time that we were hoping to hit, but we know how we do here. Between the three of us, no shortage of words. So we're going to try to make sure we do honor the wide receiver room and that tight end room. But I'm going to rapid fire through some of these comments and some different names that the chat has brought up. And if any of them kind of spark a flame for either of you, make sure you shout out. You got Logan Roberts bringing up Isaac Brown from Louisville, calling him, he's my Gibbs of next year. Eric Bochanton saying Jonah Coleman out of Washington is a mid-round guy to look at. Power and balance, not a burner. Jerry here in the chat saying Caden Ott is my 7th round sleeper running back. We have a few different guys in here. And then Logan Roberts talking about, I don't know how Le'Veon Moss isn't being talked about more. I kind of saw your ears perk up when you saw
Texas
Isaac Brown. Texas A&M. Thank you. I saw your ears perk up a little bit there when Isaac Brown from Louisville was brought to the table.
That's Matt's dog now.
My dog is a safety linebacker combo in the Lewis in the Kyle Lewis realm, and he does not like running backs who are good. So when you mentioned Isaac Brown, he's ready to go. When we were talking Mike Washington, he was just laying here because he's just waiting for him to hit the hole so that he could basically stand him up and take the ball away. But all those backs are interesting in the sense that Isaac Brown is extremely explosive, a great receiver, good ball winner. And he is going to be one of the top backs out of this class next year. Jaden Ott is, in this year's class, some special teams ability. Certainly, I think he's better in like draw plays and passing down situations when the boxes are light. He gets a little more confused and rung up when there's 6 or more in the box. Jonah Coleman, I'm probably the lowest on out of most draft nicks. I agree that of everything that the poster said, but I would say that in today's NFL, he's kind of like a really good like local actor who's now going to have to compete against A-list stars. And that's how the running back world kind of is, because people talk about his pass protection, but he drops his head too much. He overextends too much. He doesn't punch as well as you would need him to. And people look at results over process in that area with running backs. And they say, well, if he gets in front of people, that's all I really care about. No, I care about a lot more than that, because you can see what happens when you don't. He's got a little bit to work on with that. He can catch. But he has the speed, the acceleration, especially acceleration. You just watch him get chased down by defensive tackles and linebackers way too much. I think he can make a team. I just don't see him as a top 5 back in this class. So that's kind of what I think of those guys.
Okay. What about my guy McGowan from Kentucky?
Speedster, you like the speed. I think he'd be a good gap runner.
Yeah, he likes those gaps, right downhill, smack it, hit it.
Yeah,
sounds like a Belle Biv DeVos back.
That's right.
Like a Skip It commercial. The kids already know that game.
He runs hard, and I like that about him. And I think that there's a place for him in the league, and he could be a nice contributor who maybe can give you some starter value down the line in the right offense.
Let me ask you this, Matt, before Greg goes to receiver. How much analysis of players do you put into their offensive scheme and how that's going to be able to, maybe it held them back in college and you're able to see a few plays where the offense gave him an opportunity that's not normally given, that you could see a guy getting better into the NFL with more of a gap or outside zone scheme, and this team's running gap, and he's more of an outside or whatever. How much do you see of that?
Occasionally you see that, every year with maybe one or two backs, because really, if you're looking at the tools, the concepts, the skills, and the athletic ability of a player, you can often see where maybe a player is a better fit for something than what they asked him to do. And so that, as long as you're looking at the right things, you can find that opportunity with a player. And conversely, like, you can look at players and see what their production is awful, and you can look at that and go, they did everything right on that play, but their offensive line
Exactly.
basically isn't strong enough. So, like, examples of players that I had higher than most who were who I graded high on games where they were awful were Matt Forte, Joseph Adai, Ahmad Bradshaw. These were guys I watched them against some of the best defenses in college football those years, and averaged in those games like less than 3 or 2 or even a yard a carry. Watch Matt Forte against LSU, and that everybody on that team except one player could outlift every player on the Tulane offensive line. And he averaged less than 2 yards per carry, and he had a super high grade. The same was true with Adai against Auburn's top defense, Ahmad Bradshaw against Philip Fulmer's top defense those years. So, and meanwhile, I look at Darren McFadden and I'm like, he's good for an outside zone scheme, but or a gap, really more a gap scheme. But although he had great production, I looked at him and thought he can't break tackles very well. He needs directions to the hole if there's more than one option. And he's not that strong of a vision guy. Tevin Coleman was a great example of a guy who played outside zone in at Indiana, and I'd watch him and say he's a better gap runner. You can see it because he just out athletes people. And at facing Ohio State, he had like something like 178 yards, and he had 2 carries that amounted for about 2/3 to 3/4 of the gains in that game, and the rest were bad carries, just bad decisions. And I said that's not going to work in the NFL. And Kyle Shanahan, as great as he was, he wanted Coleman. He wanted to make him a zone runner and have him run zone schemes in their offense, and he couldn't make the decisions, and they had to bench him and go with Devonta Freeman, who had a career year anyway. But Freeman was a better runner because he understood how to make decisions that Coleman never could. So, yeah, if you're looking at the right things, those things occasionally stand out.